Hello, Garland Nixon here with my good friend, Dr. Jim Kavanagh, who's up there in an area of Pennsylvania that we refer to as Pennsyltucky, doing his thing. We got lots to talk about. Let's talk. Hello, all here with good old Dr. Jim Kavanagh. Hey, Jim, just a very couple words, a brief bio, so people will know who is this Dr. Jim Kavanagh? Who is this Irish guy that Garland's hanging out with?
Yeah, yeah, we are. For our viewers, we talk an hours together on the phone every time, so we're going to subject all of you to that. Yeah, I'm a native New Yorker. I was a college professor for many years at Princeton and Carnegie Mellon and Wesleyan universities. And I've been on the internet now for 12 years, I guess, writing and publishing about everything from Syria to COVID. And I was with Garland and Wilmer on their great show on Sputnik until it was crushed a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago, and many other places on the web. I publish at counterpunch.org, at the Greenville Post, and Consortium News, a bunch of other places on the web.
Yep, and you appear all over the place. I think I've seen you on Press TV and RT and all that stuff. And by the way, old Dr. Jim went to the same high school as Dr. Fauci.
Yes. I am a fellow alumnus of the same high school as Dr. Fauci, and I wrote an article about it and did a video about it, which you can find on my Substack.
All right, so let me show you something before this gets going. Let me show you something here. Just as an example.
And I played basketball in the same league as Lou Alcindor.
Oh my gosh!
And I'll tell you something about that.
Okay.
Of course, I wasn't. I don't think I actually played in a game with him, but we were in the same Catholic High School Athletic Association. And I was sitting on the sidelines as a 14-year-old kid, 15-year-old. This is what Lou Alcindor was in New York. And I said, I'm going to tell my grandchildren about this. So, of course, this is something I'm going to be telling my grandchildren about. So, of course, I told my grandchildren about it, Lou Alcindor. And the first thing, which I knew was going to come, who's Lou Alcindor? A lot of people don't know that name. Oh, now he's known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Then the second thing is, who's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? That's the problem.
Yeah, Jim, we're not as young as we used to be. 1 second. Somebody keeps calling me. There we go. Okay, so let's start here. If you look at what happened, Biden says Trump won't accept 2024 election results. The guy is not a Democrat with a small d, Biden said about his Republican rival. Now let's go to the next one. And there's a reason I'm throwing this stuff up here. Here's the next one. You all may recall this. The Summit for Democracy. History and common sense tells us that liberty, opportunity, and justice thrive in a democracy, not in an autocracy. They had the Summit for Democracy. They got a fact sheet. The Biden-Harris administration abiding commitment to democratic renewal at home and abroad. Look, they had a joint statement. They were in Seoul, South Korea, and even like liberally words. This is the libs love sentences like this. Galvanizing multi-stakeholder action. Multi-stakeholder action. Oh my God, you gotta love if you're dealing with multi-stakeholder action, you're dealing with a bunch of these eggheads. Okay, that all sounds good. Here's my point, Jim. We had an election. Certainly, we could criticize, you and I both, neither of us, we're both far to the left of the Democratic Party. Neither of us have anything to do with either of these parties. I'll say this, that being said, I find that I can have a more sensible discussion with the MAGA people than I can with the people who are the Democrats? Before we really get into this, I want to ask you that question. If you, I find that amongst the MAGA people, yeah, there's plenty of areas, but I disagree. But the average schmuck on the street, if I talk to the so-called liberals and I talk to the MAGA people, I agree with the MAGA people on a lot of things. But we talk about First Amendment stuff, and we talk about COVID stuff, and we talk about things that are true and false. I ain't saying they're perfect, but the liberal class seems to have gone off into freaking la-la land. Your thoughts on that, Jim, before we really get into all that? Let's start there.
Yeah, I know. I think certainly it's true online in Twitter, when you get into discussions and disagreements with MAGA people or conservatives, you get into discussions and you disagree and you have exchange of opinions and facts and views, whereas the what we call the shit libs, really, they just don't want to hear about it. They really, they have the epithets. The mind is programmed with a set of epithets: Putin puppet, a sadist, anti-science moron, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these are they come up with the epithet: oh, you're a Putin puppet, or you're anti-science, or you're this, or you're that. And
an anti-vaxxer.
Those words function. This is really mental conditioning of the highest kind. Those words function in their minds as triggers that tell them, I don't have to think anymore about this. And I shouldn't think anymore about this. And I shouldn't discuss this anymore. And this is a very, very bad thing that's happened over the past 8 years, 10 years, maybe 6, 8 years. I don't know. But it's happened very radically and very bad and very definitively. And you get a position where you can't say, this is what I think. This is the argument I have. These are the facts and this is the evidence and the arguments. No. Ruled out. That's MAGA. That's
far right.
That's denial. Right. The word denial comes up all the time. It's election denial. It's science denial. It's not. It's a different opinion. Not every different opinion is denial in the strong psychological sense, and you just get you're right wing. You must be right wing if you don't think we should be going to war in Ukraine to save the reactionary regime in Ukraine or whatever, or you don't think we should have vaccine mandates. This was one of my pet issues. Oh, you must be a right-wing anti-vaxxer moron, anti-science, blah, 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 blah. So this is what's happened. And it is that impenetrable defense mechanism of these epithets that they've learned and they're convinced are effective and right and correct triggers to stop thought, not to convince or not to challenge, but to stop themselves and everybody else they think from thinking. And it's, that's not me from thinking, these are epithets, and they say more about the people who use them than they do about the people they're directed to.
One of the things that you said a while back, and because the discussion, the term that I was using was critical thinking, right? They're like, they shun critical thinking. They see that as problematic, right? And then you used a term a while back, and I've used it many times, and because it made sense, and that is the crisis of epistemology. Epistemology, basically,
epistemological crisis.
Yes. How do we know what we know? I do a lot of radio shows, and I always talk to my audience, and I say, look, I don't care if you disagree with me. That's fine. It's good. It's healthy to have disagreement. But when you say something and I say, how do you know that's true? Or if I say, well, that's interesting. I thought things were different, but that's okay. Tell me, why is that so? And they give you this blank stare. You know what I mean? You've seen that stare before, or this silence on the phone, on the radio from a call, and they just stop for a second, because in their circles, nobody does that. There are things that we know to be true, and it's almost like as an act of faith, almost like a ritual kind of thinking. Our group, as an act of faith, as a ritual, we take these positions, and no one in their group says, well, wait a minute. Should we question our positions? In fact, if somebody questions them, that's problematic. Talk about how you came up with this concept of the epistemological crisis. How do we know what we know and why there's a crisis there? Because I agree with you.
Yeah, well, it's a 6-7 syllable word. I can my professorial instincts, but it's the real thing. I mean, epistemology is how we know what we know, how you go about knowing things. It's the study of how you come to knowledge. And the point about it is what I'm saying about the epithets. Science, and in the widest sense of the word, scientia, knowledge, the search for knowledge, is something that broke away from the idea of revealed text or sacred texts. So there was a dogma that you couldn't question, that gave you in advance all the answers, and went into the field, was developed by as a mode of questioning everything, really, of being in a mode where knowledge is provisional, that really what knowledge does is lead you to other questions. You can get some good knowledge and know something about X, Y, or Z, and you know what? That leads you to more questions about X, Y, or Z. And what's happened is that we've just and COVID was the nail in the coffin. And the worst thing about it, because it was pretending to be science, it was posing as and claiming to be speaking on behalf of science, and it was speaking. It was an attempt to stop thought, to make sure you can't think outside of this box. You can't ask the question. Not only do you have to take this drug I've given you, but you can't ask about it. And there were a whole set of questions like that. Things that were put forward and imposed as policies that a lot of people said, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense to me on prima facie. I don't think it makes sense for boys to be on girls' sports teams. I don't think it makes sense to be forced to take experimental drug that doesn't stop transmission. I don't think, not only do you have to do it, but you have to shut up about it. You have to not think about it. You can't try to engage me in thinking about it. So it's really a way of restricting thought, and what William Blake, the great poet, called the mind-forged manacles. It's the mind-forged manacles. This is the most powerful thing and the most dangerous thing in the world, to have in your mind the manacles that prevent you from thinking outside whatever box you've been trained to stay in mentally and intellectually. And that's what's been going on. And it's extremely, extremely dangerous.
Well, that takes us, I wanted to get that foundation to take us right where we are now, where we're going to. Because the Biden people, democracy was the word we heard over and over again, right? Democracy's on the ballot. That basically meant that if you vote for Trump, you don't get democracy. He'll destroy democracy. He's going to wipe out democracy. If you vote for Harris, you get democracy, right? This summit for democracy, and we chose which countries that were there. There were countries there that you shook your head and you're like, that's a democratic country.
Yeah.
A king, a monarchy, for God's sake. And there were other countries where you're like, Venezuela, well, for God's sake. The Carter administration went there as the Carter Institute went there. Jimmy Carter, they went there. They looked at their elections and they said, this is the cleanest election. I went there as an election observer. I went from stem to stern and I said, I don't see anything wrong with their election, but they can't come because they're not democratic, which to you and I, when we see Summit for Democracy, these people are democracies on the ballot, our first instinct is to say, and I'll put it like this. I used to work with the Attorney General's office in the state of Maryland, writing legislation for various agencies. You always start off with a glossary of terms. I'm going to use these terms in this legislation. Yeah. I have to define them so that if I'm writing a registration for DNR and it says hoop net, you can only use a hoop net here and you can't use a hoop net there in the waters of this state beyond this, blah, 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 right? You must first define hoop net.
Yes.
Or you can't prosecute anybody for violating that law. Okay. If you're going to say democracy's on the ballot, Summit for Democracy, Jim and I think, okay, I need a good don't we have to agree on a definition for democracy? Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on these? Again, same way down the road. The use of the term democracy is on the ballot. The use of these terms as in a manner of convenience. It's like Alice in Wonderland. My words say exactly what I mean, they say.
Yeah. They use them opportunistically to in the sense they want to mean, and there was, however restricted a sense they try to keep the word in. Democracy means not just having an election, not just having elections. Democracy fundamentally means power to the people. A democratic society is a society in which the people have the power. They not just the power to go to a voting booth every 4 years, but they have the consistent hold and power over the growth and the material wealth, first of all, of their societies, because and the production and distribution of material wealth, because the first thing that people need to have power in their lives is to have economic security, economic and social security in the widest sense. They need not to fear losing their homes, not to fear not being able to go to the doctor and losing their lives or their children's lives or their health, not to fear being thrown out of their job. And so unless you have economic security, you are in fact afraid. And that's not power. If you're afraid of being fired, you don't have power in the most fundamental sense. If you're afraid that the bank's going to take your house, you're not going to, you don't have power. So you might be homeless. You don't have power. So that sense of material, the power of being the stakeholder, the real stakeholder,
yeah, right,
in society. I am an owner of this society, and I can't be dislodged from that place. I'm an owner. I have a power over the material wealth of the society that we create together, that the working class really creates. And unless you have that, so the other elements of power are important too. You need the power to choose and to discuss and to talk about things and to be free in discussing and to choose your leaders and your leaders. But all of those things have to be put into the rubric, under the rubric of democracy. And if you don't do that, if you say, oh, if you have an election every 4 years that I like, or the Carter Center likes, or the government of the United States likes, then that's democracy. That's not really necessarily democracy, because there are ways of, we all know, there are ways of manipulating the electoral process in all kinds of ways. So you've got to think of democracy in a more holistic sense and in a stronger material sense. Where's the power going? Not just the ability to express a choice, but the ability to make a difference in the way you live materially in the world. And that's what, we could have all kinds of disagreements about this or that society or country, how they work about that. But unless you put that in the equation, you're not really talking about democracy. It should be called the Summit for Sanctimony. I love someone I saw the other day. This is why the United States is losing everything, and why people, one of the reasons that people are just in countries are pissed off and fed up with it, because they say, China comes and they build a port, the United States comes and they give us a fucking lecture. Can I talk like that?
Sure, we're online, buddy.
Yeah. The United States comes and they give us a lecture and they give us a sermon. And this is what it is. We've decided, and there is a kind of religious word, we are the clerics who decide the meaning of the word sanctimony and what the Bible really means. And we'll tell you that. And if you don't agree with us, you're anathema, you're a heretic, and we're going to punish you with sanctions, military and color revolutions and military overthrows, etc. And that's not the way a world works. It doesn't work anymore. It did work that way for a long time, but now the other countries are saying, we're not going to put up with that anymore. We have other people who have power, and they have material power. They're able to empower us materially, and we don't need you for that. So therefore, we don't want to listen to your lectures anymore. We don't want to listen to your sermons. And everybody has to struggle with this in the entire world, and what democracy, how the actual process of democracy unfolds in a given circumstance. And the fact is, it's too bad, because I have my opinions about it, and the world, of course, when I ruled the world, that used to be my favorite song, but it's not that way. There are different cultures, and there are China and Iran and Russia and France and England and Venezuela. They have different cultures, and they're going to struggle with implementing, if they're interested in it, implementing a democratic process in the largest way possible. We have to respect that while criticizing what taking your own position. But you don't go to China and sit down. I mean, Keir Starmer goes to China and sits down. First, he gives them a lecture on human rights. What are you talking about? You are engaging in genocide right now. You're going to come here and lecture us on human rights? What are you talking about? The United States going to lecture people on democracy? You had a first of all, two cycles ago, you had an election with the guy who lost by 3 million votes won. Now you have an election in which one party excluded any kind of democratic contest for its nomination. It completely excluded democracy from the process of their. So who are you to lecture us about democracy? This is just insulting. And people now and other countries now are in a position they weren't in 20 years ago to stand up and say, I don't care if you threaten us with your sanctions. We've seen that countries can do without the sanctions, and we have partners now that give us material power. So, we're just not interested, and we're sick of it. You people are engaging in genocide, and you're going to come and preach to us about democracy and human rights? Please go home.
Well, so let's go to. I think that was a good place to get us to where we are. Certainly, I could say, don't tell me it's a democracy if you manipulate it to the point where the final two people running for president have been selected by the ruling elite. The ruling elite says, well, you can have this or that. And then I call that democracy. No, Get out of here. I mean, come on. You literally did a coup. If I made an argument for democracy, let's face it, the argument would have to be the Republicans had more democracy than that they actually look. Yeah. They had a vote. And the guy all the polls say that's who they wanted. You can criticize them or not. Yeah. The polls say they wanted Trump. Overwhelmingly, I can look at that and say the ruling elite of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party didn't want Trump. The people wanted him. They got him. I can look at that and say that's closer to democracy than I got all my issues, all the propaganda, all the bullcrap that people are fed by the mainstream media. But if I'm going to say who's closer to democracy, the Democrats ran a so-called primary. A lot of people might not know this. In a number of states, Marianne Williamson and Dean Smith were running, and Joe Biden was running. They wouldn't put any name on the ballot except Joe Biden. You had people who met all the criteria required by the party. Every standard they required for you to be on the ballot, these people met. And the Democrats said, yes. The good news is you met all the standards to be on the ballot. The bad news is we ain't putting you on the ballot. Yeah. We're just going to put Joe Biden's name on the ballot. So should it be any shock that then they ultimately coup Joe Biden and in goes this idiot? Let's say the stupidest candidate you got to say the truth here. I watched her and I thought to myself, I don't know anyone who couldn't do a better job than her. I've never seen anything like this person. So she babbles incoherently. Literally, they can't. Now they're like, well, perhaps she should have gone on Joe Rogan. No, she'd have done worse if she went on Joe Rogan because she'd have exposed how stupid we are. So we're not allowed to say she's an idiot. She was an outstanding candidate who ran a brilliant campaign, right? But here's my point. So, not surprisingly, they got obliterated. Mm-hmm. The American now, and to me, you can argue about that the American people want this or that, more of this, more of that. Okay, there's one subject that there isn't much of an argument about, Jim. They said, you're a Putin puppet, and we got to stand up for Ukraine. Trump said, put me in, I'll get out of this as quick as possible. Notwithstanding whether or not he can do that, those were the two things that were laid on the table. Overwhelmingly, they voted for one. Of all of the issues, there was one that it couldn't have been clearer. And the response to the Biden administration is in the thumbnail, middle finger. Oh my God, the American people said they want X. Let's go into other. Your thought on these dynamics, how I set it out, you might set it out differently, how we got here and all of that stuff that I was putting together. What are your thoughts on all of that, Jim?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, it is the case, and I don't say anybody can contest it, that the Republican Party at this moment is more democratic than the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has, over the past 3 election cycles, demonstrated that it is going to stop any real democratic contest to what the donor class wants to have as its candidates for president, certainly. And it's blatant. They did that this year, as you say. They wouldn't let people on the ballot. They wouldn't let RFK Jr. They wouldn't let Marianne Williams. They did everything to kick them off the ballot because they knew those people were going to probably do better, certainly as a group. And one of them or another would probably do better than Joe Biden. Joe Biden can't do it. We've known that for 4 years, and I've said it 4 years ago, and everybody knew it, and they knew it, and they just lied about it. But anyway, the point is that they control they have super delegates. On the state level, every state level, they control things. Bernie Sanders won every county in, I think it was West Virginia, and got 0 delegates because they appointed delegates. So all of this happens. So the Democratic Party, we have a situation in which the Democrats can't go around talking about democracy to the Republicans, can't say, oh, the Republicans are going to destroy democracy. You've destroyed democracy in your own party. And this is, incontestable. Now, what you're saying about the election, again, that's true. The elections are shows that are put on by the ruling class, and they do auditions with the various factions of the ruling class who disagree about certain things, abortion rights and trans rights and climate change. That disagreements about that, but they agree fundamentally on imperialism, capitalism, and Zionism. They're not going to. So they put up their. Each party gets its auditions through primaries, and they put up 2 candidates, and those are the 2 you stuck with, and you must vote either of them because nobody else can get on the ballot, and nobody else can get on the media, etc. And so then you choose one of them, and then what happens is, the voters are in the rear view. After the election, the voters are in the rear view mirror, disappearing very fast. They go back to they're back. They're sitting in the car with their donors and with their the deep state and the capitalist class that runs them, and that Donald Trump, for example, explicitly said he was a servant of the Adelsons, and they were in the White House running around doing anything they wanted. And so that it was the Soros crowd with the Democrats, and so that's the situation. So you get a situation where after the election, it doesn't really matter what the people wanted. You know what I mean? And Joe Biden, certainly the faction that he represents in the ruling class, which which wants to crush Russia and doesn't want to allow Russia to win in Ukraine, and thinks that maybe Donald Trump is going to be too soft on that, is going to now push, even though, as you say, in this election, that was one of the clear specific differences, the attitude toward the Ukraine war. People are tired of it. They're tired of the money being spent there when they know it's not being spent on there. They can't afford rent. They can't afford groceries. They can't afford prescriptions. They can't go to the doctor, but Ukraine can get hundreds of billions of dollars. So they're sick of that. So that was the terms of, as you say, whether Donald Trump is going to change that or not, what he's going to do about it. That's what the voters were choosing. And everybody could see that. And after it, you have the Biden administration, whoever's doing it, Biden's clearly not in charge, but escalating the war and going to war against Russia, attacking the territory of the Russian Federation in a way it's a war. Even Thomas Massie is putting up a war powers resolution. Joe Biden himself, you can find the videos of 4 or 5 years ago saying, well, you can't do anything like that you need to have a resolution of Congress. Otherwise, that's an impeachable offense. And this is a major thing. This isn't like, we talked about this today. Yeah, if a party's in power and they have 2 months to a lame duck session, they'll push things through that they might want to get through, like a tax cut or a new tax or child tax credit, whatever. This is war. This is a world war with nuclear power that Joe Biden is taking upon himself, or whatever that word represents now, taking upon himself to initiate with Russia in a lame duck context where, as you say, the voters have just told him that's exactly not what we want to do. Okay. And this is a terrible situation. It's really horrible. And we have this bizarre thing in the United States where it's 2 months of lame duck, which is a throwback to the 18th century. But and so I don't know what to say, but certainly has nothing to do with democracy. It has to do with the program of defeating Russia and which they think they can do in some way, and they think they can bluff the Russians out. So they're going to follow that program, whatever the hell the American people have said about it. They think they can get away with it. They can do it, and they will do it, and they are doing it. And at the meantime, we're being now under a serious threat of worldwide war. And I don't know how anybody can look at that and think, well, this is a democratic process in action. This is a process of a faction of the ruling class that wants to make sure that the offensive to destroy Russia somehow and to undermine the Russian Federation continues, even if Donald Trump doesn't want to do it, which he may or may not want to do.
Yeah, what we're looking at now, I think, is a situation where, and I've been saying this for a while, look, the ruling elite certainly don't, want to give lowly nobody, the unwashed out here, a say in things, but they got to pretend a little bit. But that illusion of democracy has become more and more inconvenient for them, right? As the material, as the lives, as the needs of the situation for the working class deteriorates more and more and more. The working class is looking, and I think, here's what I got to say. A lot of people say if this wasn't about foreign policy. I think intuitively the people know that it's all about foreign policy. I'm so happy. I do a radio talk show in Washington, D.C., and it's huge. It's 50,000 watt station, and I get the calls, all kinds of calls, and I like that's kind of a microcosm of society, right? And what I hear is a perfect example. A guy calls in last week. He's a shit lib. Oh, Garland, you're wrong. The economy's great, and all you got to do is go to our website and look at these pie charts and things a little bit closer, and you'll understand just how things. Forget those grocery prices and people with their maxed out credit cards. Our pie charts and graphs will show you that things are wonderful, right? That was last week. So I got this lady that calls in weekly, and I can tell she's struggling and she's angry. And she called in this week to talk about that call last week. It infuriated her. It was, we're out here struggling. I got kids. I'm trying to make it and blah, blah, blah. Cut this and that. And what did she say? And all this money's going for Ukraine. I think what's happening is intuitively, at a time when, perfect example, a freight train turns over, and there's all kind of poison crap all over the place in Pennsylvania and Ohio. And at that very time, Biden was fighting for more money for Ukraine, and he was in Kiev, right? And I think intuitively people are starting to understand when you're in an empire, it's all about foreign policy, because the reason you can't have nice things like, for instance, I don't know, cleaning up the poisons that are killing everybody on the border there in Ohio and Pennsylvania, because you can't have a decent road. I'm riding down the road the other day. I'm like, my God, these roads are falling, going to hell, right? You can't have it because of the empire. It's all about foreign policy. So even though people will say, you know what, people voted on their pocketbooks, I think the Ukraine conflict, the Gaza genocide, and people keep continually hearing how much money was going out the door. I think people are starting to really get the picture and say, I'm not going to scream it's about foreign policy, but I see why the hell, and they're asking questions. Why is all that money going here when we're suffering?
Yeah, the classic line from Tip O'Neill back in the day was all politics is local. But, really, we can now say, I think, all politics is international, because the United States considers itself and plays a keystone role in the world international order. And it has since World War II. And it's that role is changing, and that's affecting us. Whether you think about it or not, it's affecting you. And you do see its effects when you have Helene, the hurricane that's devastating North Carolina, and FEMA comes and says, I'll give you $700 for your house. I mean, what are you talking about? But we're going to get another $100 million to $100 billion to Ukraine, $1 million, $100 million, $2 billion, whatever. There's no limit to it. And nobody asks where that money is coming from. So you have this, it's clear that we are committed. And everybody sees this and has to think about it. And they don't necessarily think about it, but they do kind of, as you say, instinctively react to the effects of it. We've committed ourselves to certain projects internationally that cost us blood and treasure. Okay, not so much blood right now, but In the long run, they do, and it will. And certainly, we spend our treasure on it. The Zionist project, the destruction of Russia project, etc. And that's a commitment that the government and the regime of the United States makes, and they don't make the same kind of commitment to ordinary people, to the fact that people should be able to rent a 1-bedroom apartment. Almost, I don't think there's any state in the union now where certainly not a minimum wage gives you the ability to rent a 1-bedroom apartment. That you can have medical care, that you can have housing, that you have a decent retirement and you have education for your kids. There's no commitment to that. That's all. We got to negotiate about that. We start with the premise that nobody deserves anything. You got to figure out how you're going to get the money for it, which is ridiculous. But the other things, we have commitments to those things. Those are international commitments, because we have to be the hegemon of the world, and there's no debate about that or negotiation about it, and there's no counting the dollars about it either. So people do, whether they think about it consciously, instinctively, they understand that more and more when it becomes impossible not to understand. When you're living in a destroyed field in North Carolina, where your home has been destroyed, and you're watching the United States blow up houses in Gaza and blow up houses in Ukraine and pour money and weapons without, constantly stating, and not only stating, but in action, giving support to all these things. And you say, why can't we get that support here? And that's what's happening. And people are pissed off about it, and they're rightfully pissed off about it. I wish I could say I think anything would be done about it, but that's so it's not true that all politics is local. It's at least as true, let's put it that way, that all politics is international. It comes back, and it comes back in policies against people. That's why you have suppression of freedom of speech, because they need you not to talk about and not to see and not to understand what's going on over there, because you might object to it, and not to see that what Biden just did is illegal. It's not. It's American constitutional law. It's illegal. It's against everything, and it's going to drag us into war. But you got to not talk about it. We don't talk about that so much. So this is, and those policies come back, and you can't talk about it. You're not going to be able to talk about pro-Palestine demonstrations. You're going to get kicked out of the country. Whatever. That's what Pam Bondi just said about the Biden administration, the Trump administration, American or not, American or foreign students, we got to kick them out of the country if they're pro-Palestine. That is pro-terrorist. So this is all going to come back. That's a policy that's coming back to haunt the repression that we do over there, the aggression that we do over there comes back as repression at home too. So both in terms of the material, financial, and that you see going out and never coming here, and in terms of the policies of repression that are necessary to maintain the aggression overseas.
Yeah, let's look at this. Here's a perfect example. Well, look at this. Biden administration informs Congress it will forgive $5 billion in economic loans to Ukraine.
Yeah.
The Biden administration told Congress it plans to cancel $4.65 billion in debt owed by Ukraine, approximately half of an economic loan. So we have taken the step that was outlined in the law to cancel those loans, provide that economic assistance to Ukraine. Congress passed a supplemental funding bill that earned $60 billion worth of aid to Ukraine, including $9 billion structured as a loan with proper provisions. Here's the truth, the fact of the matter. And we already know, for the most part, most of Ukraine's been sold to BlackRock. I don't know how much you know about that, but they've sold a lot of what's going to be left of Ukraine will be sold to BlackRock. But they play the game. We've got to get money to Ukraine. Well, it's too expensive. Okay, we'll loan it to them. Will Congress, let's loan them some money. And then, okay, we've loaned them the money. Time for them to pay them back. Well, Trump's coming in. He might want the money back. He might not go along with this. We're not sure. As we know, he probably will if he stole, but he might not. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
The American people have had enough of this. Screw them. Screw the Americans. This is you, American people. Let's forgive the loan. So basically, we already know all of that money will never be paid. Yeah. But my point again is the American people just voted.
Yes.
They said, we don't want this. And what does Biden say before? Look, you like Clinton. if you got somebody that you gotta, some crook that you gotta pardon, and he's going to give you some money under the table, fair enough. We know that you're all crooks anyway. Take your money under the table, sell some more paintings of Hunter Biden's finger painting, kindergarten finger painting for $400,000 or $800,000. Look, we're accustomed to that. Go ahead. That's your money. Do what you got to do. That's part of the game. It's called, you've been doing it all along. They call Nancy Pelosi, get some stock tips, whatever you got to do. Part of the game, we get it, right? But we just voted no. And the answer is, I heard you, but the answer is yes. And now, you know what's become now? We expect you to feather your nest and line your pockets on the way out. Set up your $400,000 speaking engagements like Obama did for whoever. We're sure. Do what you got to do. Part of the game. We understand it. But it seems like they've literally said, what are the things that the people voted against? Let's make a list of them and make sure we get them all accomplished.
Yeah. No, your point is valid there. That in this situation, especially with the Ukraine thing, people were clearly voting against the unlimited aid to Ukraine, both militarily and financially, and the commitment to that. And they're tired of it. They don't want it. They've had it with forever wars. They've had it with forever wars for 10 years, but they keep going on. And this is another one. And they don't want to get involved in World War III. And they see, we're going to forgive $5 billion of Ukraine's debt, but couldn't do that with student loans. You can't forgive those student loans for American people. And so, and there is, in this context of this lame duck period, a defiance of the will of the American people as expressed during the election on this issue quite clearly. And it's an important issue. It's World War III issue. And the Biden administration is saying, we don't care what we know, what you have expressed clearly, what you want about this, which is to back off from this. We're going to escalate it. We're going to go forward with it. We're going to make it impossible for Russia not to strike us in some way. And this is crazy. And it's very, very, very dangerous. And it's contempt. It's contempt for the people. And they are contemptuous of the American people. And certainly of people who are suffering. It is contemptuous. And people have to realize that this is, George Carlin, they don't give a damn about you. They really don't. And you're being had. Everybody plays the fool. And, me too, of my life, many times played the fool. The American people get played for fools a lot. And because they've structured a system in which it's hard to see another way than to bounce around between these two parties. And either way you're going to get played. And that's the problem. And it's very, very difficult. But this situation, this crazy situation, we talked about earlier, we have two months of lame duck presidency. This is in the 18th century, of course, it took a lot to drive around to move around the country, to travel and set things up. It's not the case now. This is crazy. But you'd have to have an election system where you have quick and accurate and confident election counting. So you'd have the result that would be acceptable to everybody. And you'd have to have parties. If the British Labour Party or the Tory Party, when they're out of power, they have a shadow cabinet. Everybody can see, this is the guy who's going to be Secretary of State. This is the guy who's going to be Secretary of Treasury. You see what their policies are. Here you have this. It's purely it's purely a TV. Pick your, which bachelor gets picked. It's purely a TV reality show. It's personalities that you pick, and the person you pick, you really don't know what they're going to do. They don't know what they're going to do until after the election, and they say, "Now I'm going to put together my cabinet," and see, and then you might be able to see what I'm going to do. It take 2 months to do that. And that's nuts. And that's not serious politics. It's not, it's advertising. It's reality show TV, and once they get greenlit, then they'll put the show together, so this is, this is all a very difficult thing to change. That's the American constitutional system. And, you've got to change that element of the Constitution, but there's a lot of things involved in that. A real electoral process. I just saw something today, and if it's true, I hope it's true. Idaho is going to put online every ballot. Why not? That's technology. That technology allows you to do that. Absolutely. That's the way you do it. There's no reason for that. Nothing should be proprietary or hidden. But we have to set that up. And it's 50 states, and they all have their own jurisdiction, and so it's very, very difficult. But this is what we're stuck with, and it stinks. Well, and really, this business with, as you say, the Ukraine thing. I mean, we're on the verge of World War III. I think closer than even we were in at least as close as in the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Closer. But let me ask you this. One of the things that I think has been consequential during the Biden administration, and I'll say this, I believe you could add up the 10 worst presidents and add them all into one, and Biden be worse than all of them. But one of the things that has been, I think, exposed is the U.S. relationship with Europe. Example, you were just talking about the UK, right? Okay, they were sick and tired of the Tories. We've had enough of these guys. We're bringing in Keir Starmer. There's no out for them. They get the exact same policies. You got right now, Germany, they got an election in February. And what are they saying? The AfD might win. Maybe we might have to outlaw the AfD so they don't win, right? When you look at France, the so-called left, whatever you want to call them, whatever you want to call these people, a particular political group won. And Macron pulled a Biden. Hey, these guys won, and they get their prime minister. And Macron's answer was, no, they really don't. Yeah. I'm going to put in some neoliberal hack that I already have, and who cares about this? So what we see, to me, is a uniformity throughout the U.S. and what certainly appears to be their vassals. Your thoughts on all of that and the relationship that has been exposed between the U.S. and Europe and Nord Stream? Anyway, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, well, look, it's anti-democratic. I mean, this is the whole pretension of democracy is exposed. I mean, the French election is a classic example. They literally said, "Oh, we lost the election, but elections don't matter that much anymore. They don't matter to us." I mean, they literally said that. And so I'm gonna appoint the people I want to appoint because I still have the authority to do that, even though we know it's not what I should be doing, etc. And this is the dynamic that's been going on that they've been afraid of since Brexit and Trump in 2016. That populism, what they call populism, it's getting out of control. We no longer have a hold on the thinking of the people as we did before. That's partly because of the internet. It's partly because of a lot of things. And people are out of our control. We had them in the box, and we were pretty secure they're going to stay in that box. But suddenly they're out of the box, and they're saying things and doing things we really think are important that we don't want them to do. So therefore, we're going to have to just ignore them or put more explicit restrictions on them from what they can do, what they can say, what parties we can have, what parties we don't have, what political factions we can have. And that's what we have to do. And this has been Europe-wide and America and Canada. And of course, the relationship between, but also what the Russia-Ukraine war has exposed is the fealty of Europe to, the European economies are being destroyed by this offensive against Russia, this economic offensive and this military offensive. And they can see it happening. They know what happened. The Nord Stream pipeline, and the cost of energy is destroying Germany, Germany's economy. And they're going along with it because you see the extent to which what Europeans thought was European democracy, it was real. There was something there. But at the end of the day, it was not going to be allowed to evolve in a way that was against the United States, that was against the program of American hegemony in the world. The European governments have agreed and still agree to maintain themselves as part of the adjunct, the assistance to American hegemony in the world. And they don't want to allow their own populations to break away from that. And, this is again, there's nobody here who can preach democracy to anybody else. The Europeans can't preach democracy to the Chinese or the Iranians or the Indians or there's no preaching about democracy. There's doing some practicing of it in a way that you haven't done before, and they don't have independence. And this is a part of a world system based on American hegemony and Euro-American hegemony with America in the lead that's breaking up, and they don't know what to do about it, and they don't want to allow their populations to express what they want to do about it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think what we're seeing, let me ask you this, because you mentioned some semblance of democracy that may have been um in Europe. And to me, that's like the whole discussion about the First Amendment, right? Which now is being, but look, the Biden people, oh, you want to talk about, I don't know, COVID or something like that? You want to question it? Sorry, you can't. You're thrown off of whatever. You want to question Ukraine? You're deplatformed. You have to shut up. People have been literally charged for tweets, charged and taken for a tweet, right? And it happens all the time. Okay, if I have freedom of speech until I say something that you don't like, or if I have democracy until such time as the ruling elite wants something and then I vote against it. Here's my thing. The only test for democracy is when the ruling elite wants something and the working class and the masses say no. The test for whether I have free speech is when I say something that you don't want me to say. So to me, when you say you had free speech up until such time as you said things that we don't like, it wasn't tested. Free speech, I always talk about this, specifically protects unpopular speech. So my argument is this. They never had democracy, because when the test for the standards for democracy was put forth, they failed. The government, the ruling elite failed. And when the test of the standards for free speech, which is unpopular speech that the government really doesn't like, came about, that failed. I think what we're seeing is exposed. They never had democracy and they never had free speech. What do you think about that angle, Jim?
Well, I think I'm going to be more nuanced. They did have democracy, a large portion of democracy in Europe and in the the United States is extremely limited democracy. Europeans they have parties, they have socialist parties, communist parties, they have and they were very popular. What they were put in a box, however, by and they agreed to a certain extent. People have to realize the deal that was made at Yalta and Potsdam was okay. Soviet Union has hegemony over Eastern Europe, but there was a deal made. The other side of that deal was Stalin's going to agree to let the Western European capitalist parties take control over those parties, and they stood down the communist parties in those countries who were popular and armed, and they disarmed them. Watch 1900, the great movie by Bertolucci, and what the end of that movie when the communist activist played by I forget his name, but he comes in and tells us, you got to disarm, you got to put your guns on the truck. So that was a deal that held, but social democracy in those countries needed to provide material benefits and democracy, because there was a post-capitalist alternative that was a full employment, full service, healthcare, et cetera, alternative. Once that disappeared, then all of a sudden the social democracy, they don't even want that anymore. Now it's all complete neoliberalism, and they're going to crush. And they also had control. I mean, this is very important. They had media that were the only game in town, and they had guardrails and guardians in the media, hall monitors, guys, cops on the setting up, guardrails that you could only pass through to get something to say what you wanted to say. Now it's been the explosion of the internet and access to information has, for everybody, including me, and that enabled you to see and think about things you haven't had before. And the guardrails are not there, and they're desperately trying to put them back in place. So, as I said, the democratic thing has always been, in both the United States and Europe, controlled by, yes, ultimately the ruling classes, the capitalist ruling classes, maintain essential power and the veto power over anything happening in the country. But they did allow, look, free speech, that was the ACLU, it, you were part of it. When it was in the days that Nazis can march in Skokie, in the Jewish neighborhood in Skokie. And the United States always did. The First Amendment is a unique thing. Other countries and other cultures are not going to, have not had, and may not ever have as strong a protection of free speech as the First Amendment gives Americans. I'm all for it. It's a good thing. And it really does mean, other countries, Germany after World War II, outlawing Nazism, I can understand. You know what I mean? Yeah. This is, but you got to, again, respect other countries about this, and there's nothing absolute about, you can restrict things like commercial speech or pornography, or there are things like that you.
The old yelling fire in a crowded theater stuff.
Well, that's a terrible example, but in the United States, you can't. No, that was not the standard. That was put into that was a remark that was made. It was not the standard that was used. But anyway, in fact, as I say, in the United States, there's no such thing. I can hate people. I can have misinformation, disinformation, stupid speech, right, hate speech, whatever. My one of my proudest moments in teaching, I had a questionnaire, a teacher evaluation, and then I helped to construct. And I said, we have to have an ability for people to say negative things as well as positive things. So the questions would go from +5 to -5. And one of the questions was, treats everybody equally without regard to race, creed, or color. Yes or no? +5 to -5. And then underneath it was, if you put the minus, and which group is treated unfairly. So I got one which said -5, and which group was treated unfairly insults everyone without regard to race, creed, or color. So I live what I say about this. Of course, that's why I'm not teaching. I would feel comfortable teaching now. But so that's. This is the United States, and this is why this is baloney. And what I'm telling you, what I said in my article about Trump's free speech fandango, and what Pam Bondi just said is, Trump said, "Oh, he got a great speech about free speech. Great thing. I'm going to do away with all this. We're going to do away with all censorship, blah, 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 blah. And we're going to require that social media is more intensive in controlling promotion of terrorism and child pornography and promoting terrorism." So guess what? The word terrorism is now replacing the word misinformation, and they're going to use that as the excuse to cut down on, to do more intensive, more repression on free speech when it's pro-Palestinian. Now it's pro-terrorism. You can promote anything you want. And Nelson Mandela and the ANC were terrorists until 2008, according to the United States. I can promote the cause of Nelson Mandela and ANC. The leaders of Israel have explicitly defined themselves as terrorists. I can promote the cause of Israel and Zionism if I want, which is based on terrorism, and they've said it. And I can politically promote the cause of Hamas and the PFLP and the PIJ and the Palestinian armed resistance if I want. That's protected free speech, and they're going to go after it just harder. They promised you they're going to go after it harder. So this is because these things are dangerous, and it is the fact that speech does have power. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's why it's important that you protect it, because it doesn't have all the power, but it has the power to change people's minds. As I said, the mind forged manacles, when you break those, that's the most important thing you can do. And that's the thing they have to protect the most. So, I'm a strong believer in the strength of the First Amendment and keeping it strong and fighting for it. But democracy is, as I say, it has to do with the power of the people materially, as well as the power to speak and say what they want. They have to be able to live without fear, without economic fear.
Yeah, and now something else I want to ask you about, last thing, because we're running out of time, and that is, and of course we're on YouTube, so I have to say that, boy, those vaccines and boosters are absolutely wonderful. In fact, Jim and I always get a booster both before and after we do a show, because they're great. They protect everything, prevent everything. Get your boosters daily. I've been going with an IV drip lately to make sure I get them constantly. So you got to make sure you're on top of those good old safe and effective stuff. YouTube, so please don't throw me off. But that notwithstanding the wonderful effects that we get from boosters, they make you healthy. One of the things that isn't discussed, there's lots of talk about we lost because I love this. We went too far left, and by too far left, they mean the whole LGBTQ anti-trans stuff. That's the only thing that means left. It's nothing to do with corporate crap, war, screwing over the working class. Only the niche social issues, right? But that being said, one thing is never discussed: the issue of how COVID could have possibly affected voters. As in one of the examples that I gave, one of the groups in America that were the least likely to go along with the jab was Black males. And when you talk to them, they were like, yeah, we heard of the Tuskegee experiment, stuff like that. They had a historical context and they didn't. And interestingly enough, for the first time, Black males, a lot of them either stayed home, voted for Trump, whatever. They voiced their anger. Now, we were told by MSNBC it's because they're a bunch of white supremacists and racist, sexist, misogynists, which clearly is true, right? But there's no greater group of white supremacists than Black males. But my point is, I think that, was it directly because of that? I think that a lot of people lost their support. I had somebody say to me, man, I'm sure glad we had, I don't like the Republicans for anything, but I'm sure glad we had a Republican during COVID, because then we didn't have all the lockdowns, and we had the lockdowns, but not as many, restrictions as other people.
You mean Republican governor in Maryland?
Republican governor, yeah. Here's my point. There's no discussion about how or if the whole COVID mess hurt the Democrats. I know it did. I know personally people who it did. But that discussion can't be there. Your thoughts, Jim?
Well, in the largest sense, that's all part of this business of, you can't think about certain things. And it's true. Again, there were a bunch of things that were done, as I've said, that you had that people could see prima facie, there's something fishy about this, but you have to, you don't only have to take it, you have to shut up about it. And the damages from that are becoming evident to everybody. And that people they're angry. They're really pissed off, and rightfully so, about being treated like that. I had to not only take these fucking jabs, but I would be fired from my job. I'm going to be, lose my career, might be evicted from my home, lose my health insurance, and hundreds of thousands of people fired from their jobs. I mean, what are you talking? And they go on television now. Deborah Burks, this 2 days ago. Oh yeah, we knew it wasn't going to stop transmission, and maybe we oversold it a bit. What are you talking about? You fired people from their jobs. Another guy saying, I talked to Anthony Fauci about this, and he said, yeah, maybe the jab really doesn't affect anybody, but people who have in the highest risk groups. But we can't say that because we'll undermine the vaccine program. Meanwhile, you've just, and not only did you impose the policy, but you also treated people like shit. Who questioned it? You insulted them. You fired them from their jobs. You told them they were morons and assholes and they were anti-scientific. And this is something that's pissing people off about everything. It pisses people off when they question the Ukraine war and you get Putin puppet, and it pisses people off when they question this experimental drug and you say, oh, you're an idiot. You're a moron. You're an anti-vaxxer. So this is just nonsense, and you're
killing people. Remember that? They said you're killing people. They said when you said, I have some questions, I'd like to see some more data. Questions. Yeah. They literally said you're killing people. Yes. They said you're a murderer.
Your children should be taken away from you. Your children should be taken away from you. Your benefits should be taken away from you. You're a plague carrier. You're a murderer. Exactly. And people have to account for this. Is my point. And what you're saying is the Democratic Party and all the people who put up with this, on all of these levels, who put up with this, insulting people instead of talking to them and arguing with them with evidence and arguments, they have to account for that. Everybody hates them and despises them for this, and rightfully so. And talking about the black males, everybody should see that there's a great clip of Fauci walking around with, I don't know who it was, Burks or somebody else, going knocking on doors in DC. Did you get your COVID shot? And he had this young black guy, and he said, no, I'm not getting a COVID shot. You don't know what the hell that's in that. And I don't know what's in that. And the guy, Fauci kind of runs away. The guy was absolutely right. And that's what I think it was 70% of the black parents in DC didn't want to get the shots. With their children going to be kicked out of school, get kicked out. People lost their education. They lost their jobs for lies that they knew were lies. that we now know they knew, and they say now, yeah, we knew this wasn't going to prevent transmission, but they lied about that for years. And it was baloney, and people lost their businesses, black businesses, by 40%. They're not getting that back for people. Did people get their jobs back, and all the wages they lost and the benefit? So this has been, and the only person I saw on cable news talk, I did see one person mention this, that this was a factor in what happened to the Democrats, and that was Chris Christie. And I forget, he was on CNN or MSNBC, and he said, one thing we're not talking about is the COVID factor and the fact that people were angry about the COVID policies. And he gave us an example. He said, look at Rick Scott in Florida. He won the previous elections. He won by 0.5%, 1%. It was very close. This time he won by a lot, and that's because Christie proposed. A lot of people moved to Florida because they were pissed off and they wanted to escape the terrible COVID policies that were everywhere else. And they were part of the reason why the Republicans did so well in Florida. But it is absolutely one of the reasons. And they don't want to talk about it. They want to do the anti-left, anti-woke. Anti-left is anti-woke. That's what they want to do. The Democrats move too far to the left. Anti-woke. That's why I don't like the anti-woke movement either. I didn't like the woke movement, but I don't like the anti-woke movement. The anti-woke movement wants to say, oh, this is the left and this is what we're opposed to, and woke is the left, and blah, blah, blah. So that's what they want to keep it on. They don't want to talk about what the COVID policies did and what the kind of insulting aspects of and they don't want to talk about what the Ukraine war actually was doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They want to have an argument about wokeness, and I really don't want to have an argument about that.
Well, and when I look at it, I say, look, the traditional groups, traditional constituencies of the Democratic Party, people that have written, for the past 70, 80 years, whatever, these constituencies have voted diehard Democrat. After COVID, after Biden comes in and they do this stuff, significant parts of these constituencies are out. They're done. They've been through, guess what? Is this the first, what do you call it, recession they've been through? Yeah, 2008. Yeah. Is this the first one of these things, the bad economies, war? They've been through Vietnam. They've been through all kinds of wars that they were unhappy with, but they didn't leave. What is different now? What's different now is COVID. I add this too. They don't want to talk about this. Young people got obliterated economically during COVID. They were done. And let me say this. I used to like to go to California, go to San Francisco, or the West Coast, go to Frisco, you go to LA, right? And there'd be some homelessness there, more than you're comfortable with. Don't go there now. Mm-hmm. Post-COVID, California is an apocalyptic wasteland. And you know what? Even the Republicans will talk about Gavin Newsom as if an individual did it. Gavin Newsom, look what he's done to California, right?
Yeah.
But look at California, Oakland, all of them pre-COVID, and look at them post-COVID. And it becomes obvious that, yes, there was devastation and there was homelessness. But COVID obliterated, I'll tell you what it did. It turned the working class into the working poor. Mm-hmm. And the working poor are now living in a street, in a tent under the overpass.
Yeah, no. It's a terrible social situation, and it did get worse, absolutely, because of the COVID policies, and they just don't want to face it because it really is. They invested in it psychologically and emotionally. This makes me a good person to want to have these restrictions and vaccine mandates, and. And it's like, and the people who suffered from it because they lost their jobs, they lost their education, they lost their health care, they might have lost their apartments or their homes, and they're saying, you insulted me, and you're not taking any account of that. You wanted me to, and it's like that, but it's also like. They know this in terms of the abortion rights. This was my body. You wanted to come and put something in my body, a medication, a genetic therapy intervention that I don't know what it's going to do to me. And it has had bad effects on people, and they have to acknowledge it. And they know, but they're very rare. But they're not as rare as nothing. and you wanted to come. You want to invade my body now, and tell me if I resist that, or if I express any skepticism about that, I'm an asshole. I'm a moron. I'm anti-scientific, or I'm racist, or I'm right wing. What the hell?
You deserve to die.
Right wing because I don't want you to stick something in my body. And that's
you deserve to die. They'll say,
you deserve to
die. I hope you die. You anti-vax, literally, you anti-vaxxers should die.
Well, I'll tell you, I wrote the long article against vaccine mandates for my classmates from the high school that Anthony Fauci went to, and I got a torrent of abuse for it, including a doctor who literally wrote and said, the only thing I'd like to see is I'd like to watch Kavanagh dying in agony. A doctor in a Catholic high school, in a Catholic hospital. I would like to see Jim dying in agony because he didn't take his shot. That's why he apologized for that to me about a month ago after 3 years for saying that. And that went out to all my classmates who were, from this Catholic high school that we and Fauci went to. Not one of them noticed it until I said we had months of discussion. I said, I guess I just want to point out that somebody on this list actually expressed the desire to see me die in agony. And nobody's noticed this. Oh, well, I did notice it, but I didn't say anything about that. I was literally told you should die in agony because you oppose mandates, forcibly taking people a drug, giving people a drug. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. And look, that's why women are opposed, are furious about abortion rights. You're telling me what's going to happen to my body. You're telling me I have to have something in my body that I don't want, whatever you think it is. You're telling me I have to do this for, this is my body. My body, my choice is a great slogan. They gave it up because what about this drug? What about this intervention that doesn't stop transmission?
And we're supposed
to no. That's not the same thing. Yes, it is. You're putting something in my body that there's a risk for. How rare you want to. It's a risk that I didn't have before. You're adding that risk to that's my choice. It's my body. So and people were not only forced to do it, but they were insulted because of it. It's exactly so. And that's why people are as pissed off as they are, and rightfully so, and they should. And until the people who did that account for it and come and say, yes, I did this and it was wrong, and I should never have done this, and until you acknowledge that, I'm never going to trust you again.
Yeah, and a few years later, we have an election, and the people who pushed that, who wouldn't allow a discussion, get crushed, obliterated, smashed, and nobody wants to say, you know what? Let's talk about what it was about. Oh, it was about trans bathrooms. It was about, I'm sure those things were a fact, but nobody wants to say you locked down everybody. People had nail salons and hair things and things that people do with their hands to make a living.
Yep.
Every day they need to be open to sell things. And you said to people, look, your little store on the corner where 4 or 5 people come in at a time, that's too dangerous. But this store over here, where 1,000 people come in, we're going to allow them to be open. But yours, where 5 people come in, that'd be just too dangerous. We're going to only allow the big box store where thousands of people are hacking and coughing and wandering all over each other. That all went down. People lost everything. Their lives were destroyed. Their 401ks, which were supposed to be for retirement, got wiped out because they had to get that money to live off those who had it, right? Food lines around the corner where people were begging for food. It was disastrous. And nobody wants to look at this 2-3 years later when that very party gets wiped out, and nobody wants to say, I wonder if that could have had something to do with it.
Yeah.
In fact, it's telling to me that that they'll talk about lots of stuff. They're starting to talk about economics now. I saw Hakeem Jeffries of all Uncle Tom's to be on. He's on there. Well, jobs was an issue. The views are like, oh, it was sexism and racism. He's like, well, people are struggling. They didn't have jobs. So they can talk about that. Not that they're going to do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody's going to say, you know, do you think
No.
maybe locking people down and causing them to lose everything? You think that could have possibly had an effect? You can't talk about that. To me, is an example of why it has to be a significant part of what's happening in both a direct way, but also in indirect ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and as I say, it's not just the locking people down, it's the locking people down and attacking them for questioning it and treating them like shit and insulting them for questioning it. You know, and that really pisses people off, and it should. You know, I need to lock you down. Okay, let's have a discussion about this. No, just shut up and get and take and you know, padlock the lock. You know, this is what really pisses people off. I have serious questions about this. This doesn't make any sense to me, you know? And oh, no, we don't want to talk to you about that. You just shut up and take it. And that's exactly what they did. And it was not only hurtful to people, it was insulting to them. And that's why people are as pissed off as they are.
Yes, yeah, that's a fact. Well, Jim, I think we've been on long enough, but I think we got a lot accomplished on a Saturday afternoon. Tell people where they can find you and all your good works.
Well, you can find everything on my Substack. I also have a YouTube and Rumble channel, and you can follow me on Twitter at the polemicist _. But everything will usually up on my Substack channel. You can subscribe for free. Everything's available to everybody. Paid subscribers get a preview, get a free preview, but everything else is available. So please come on over.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jim. And where we are now is what's interesting, what's ironic, what's paradoxical, all of those words, is that we've been told for the last several years that Vladimir Putin is the epitome of all evil. He is the Satan incarnate, blah, blah, blah. And right now, the world exists by his grace. Interestingly enough, you know what I mean? The world's like Jimmy Dore, he said it. I went on RT the other day and I said it. We can only hope and pray that the leaders in Russia, now these idiots are like, I don't know if you've seen this. Yes, they're considering attacking the Israel's considering Israel, right? Israel's considering attacking the Iranian nuclear sites, right? And they're going to dust something up in the Taiwan Strait or whatever, right? So the truth is, we can only hope that the Iranian leadership, the Chinese leadership, the North Korean leadership, the Russian leadership, well, I was going to say are smarter than ours. Joe Biden's not even in the picture. God only knows. This is Blinken Sullivan. He don't even know what the hell day it is. He don't know he's alive. But isn't it a great irony that the people that we were told were evil are the ones that we can only hope that they're wise enough to say, you know, I see the trap and I'm not going to fall into the trap. I'm thinking of here's what I keep saying, Jim. Russia's been around for 1,000 years. These people have been around for a long, long time. The way they see time is different than the way, and I think they can make it 2 months because they know that you don't want to bail Biden out. But in a way, starting like World War III or nuclear war, whatever, kind of bails them out. And I think think and hope that they're wise enough to do that.
Yeah, that's a hell of a thing to say, but it's true. It's true. You know, Vladimir Putin could have already acted in a way that would have gotten us much closer to war. He actually acted in a very restrained way, I think, you know, and the problem I fear is that it's not enough. It's not hard enough. And the idiots and the neocons who are, or whatever you want to call them, in control of this are going to say, you see, he didn't do it. That wasn't that bad. We can go further. We can provoke him further. And this is the same thing with the Iranians. You know, they have not, they've withheld to a certain extent, going as far as they could have and legitimately had the right to, given the circumstance. And I'm just afraid, you know, certainly the Israelis don't give a damn. Whatever we're going to do, nothing the Iranians could do that could stop the Israelis from doing what they want. But the Americans, you know, with global thermonuclear war, you know, Vladimir Putin doesn't want it. To a certain extent, he keeps saying, this is what you're going to get if you keep moving. This is what you're going to get. And the American, whoever is running it, is still under the delusion, they'll never do that. We'll never get that because they're afraid of it. They're too afraid. And nobody's.
You know what I look for next? What do you think? And I know we both got to go, but I look for this. Well, we may need to, before we leave out in the next 2 months, to recognize Taiwan as an independent nation. You know what I mean? It's like, well, shit, we try to cross that red line. What about the Iranians? Yeah, let's give the Chinese a shot. Hey, we're going to recognize Taiwan as an independent. What do you want to bet, Jim? I bet you keep reading the newspaper in the next couple of weeks, and the discussion of recognizing Taiwan as an independent nation and setting up American bases there, putting nukes there, making it the 51st state, you know, all of the above, that they're going to start talking about that craziness.
I'm going to say, no, I don't think so. But what do you say, 60-40? Yeah. But I do think it's almost certain that they're going to attack Iran.
Yeah, God only
the
knows.
United States and Israel together are going to attack Iran, and they want to do that before January 20th.
Well, add this. See, they see Iran as a Russian ally. In a way, they'll see that as opening up another front against Russia. You know what I mean? Because it's a Russian ally. So, all right. Well, thanks a lot, Jim. And everybody follow Jim all over creation. So on his Jim Kavanagh, you see there's no U in that Kavanagh.
That's
so
right.
When you look up Jim Kavanagh, he's easy to find. All right. Thanks a lot, Jim.
All
thank you. And we're out. Everyone, oh, by the way, last but not least, you guys know I'm not on X. So please, we got right now 916 people. We should have 916 people share this.
Yeah. I want to see 916 new followers.
Yeah, we got lots of new followers, and everybody's got to share this on X. And of course, you see all of the stuff, whether it's buy me a coffee or Patreon, whatever. If you can afford to help the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. We're out.
Take it easy.